A prayer for when you're crushed but smiling. Part 1. The smile that hides the storm. Like and subscribe for more stories that heal, uplift, and remind you you're not alone. There's a unique kind of heartbreak that wears a smile. Emily sat on the crowded train, her sketchbook resting on her knees, pencil gliding almost automatically. Around her, morning commuters scrolled their phones, sipped coffees, and leaned against windows with blank stares. She smiled faintly at the little girl across from her, who was giggling at her own reflection in the glass. That smile, that tender, soft grin was practiced, polished. It said, "I'm okay," even though her soul whispered otherwise. Underneath it all, she carried weight, unpaid bills, a broken engagement, a dream that once shone bright, now flickering dimly in the corner of her spirit. No one could tell, and that was both her gift and her curse. For years, Emily believed that strength meant silence. She was the dependable one, the helper. The person who would bring cupcakes to the office even after crying in the car for 15 minutes, the one who listened to everyone else's stories, rarely telling her own. She was raised on the belief that vulnerability was dangerous, and that you should keep your pain private. Like chipped china stored behind the glass. Even when her father died last year, she didn't crumble at least not publicly. She planned the funeral, cleaned out his apartment, gave the eulogy. Everyone told her how strong she was. "You're so composed, you're holding up so well." No one noticed how tightly she was gripping the pieces of her own crumbling foundation. That morning, something changed. As the train jolted forward, Emily's eyes lingered on a crumpled flyer taped near the door. Healing Hearts Group, a safe space to share. It seemed like those groups where strangers cry into styrofoam cups of coffee, but for some reason it stirred something inside her. A question. What if strength wasn't silence? What if real courage looked more like honesty? She quickly scribbled the contact number on the back of her sketchbook page, then tucked it away, almost ashamed she had even considered it. Still, the idea lingered in her chest like a prayer she hadn't yet spoken aloud. Later that evening, Emily lit a candle in her tiny apartment. It was her nightly ritual: soft light, tea, and one quiet moment before facing the cluttered mind. Her cat, Toby, curled at her feet, and for the first time in a while, she allowed herself to pray. Not the polished prayers she had grown up saying at Sunday school, but a raw, wordless cry that began in her chest and leaked into her breath. "God, I don't know what I'm doing, but I'm tired of pretending I'm fine." Tears welled up, unexpected but relieving. Her smile was gone, and with it, some of the weight lifted in that moment. Something sacred unfolded. Not because she had answers, but because she had been honest. It was then she understood. The smile was not the enemy. Smiling wasn't fake. It was survival. But it wasn't the whole truth either. Underneath her curated peace was a spirit begging to be seen, not as strong, but as real. And God, she imagined, saw all of it. Not just the Sunday best version of her faith. Not just the driven artist who held it all together, but the deeply human woman who sometimes felt like she was barely keeping her head above water, and he stayed. In her silence, in her tears, in the smallest whisper of hope that maybe, just maybe, she could begin again. So she whispered a prayer, shaky and soft. "God, I don't know how to fix this, but help me stop hiding behind my smile. Help me be okay with not being okay. Help me find beauty in broken things. Let today be the first day I stop running from my own heart." She exhaled deeply, almost surprised by the peace that followed. It wasn't fireworks. It wasn't a miracle. It was subtle, like the way dawn begins, just a crack of light on the horizon, enough to take one step. Enough to believe healing was possible. Enough to trust that she wasn't meant to carry all this pain alone. Part 2. Finding strength in weakness. There's something disorienting about being the strong one for too long. Emily woke up the next morning with that all-too-familiar weight pressing on her chest. It wasn't physical but emotional, spiritual, invisible. It was the heaviness of being needed, of staying composed, of managing the chaos in her mind while appearing fine to the world. The night before, she had cracked open a part of herself she usually kept sealed shut. That small, trembling prayer she whispered hadn't changed her circumstances, but it shifted something internal. She couldn't go back to pretending like everything was okay, not now. Something inside her had awakened, something tired of the lie that strength meant silence. Later that day, she stood in front of the community center, where the support group met. She hadn't told anyone, no friends, no coworkers. She felt ridiculous even considering it. She helped others, not the other way around. But she was learning that strength wasn't about holding it together. It was about showing up when every fiber of your being tells you to hide. With a deep breath, Emily walked through the glass doors and found herself in a small room with mismatched chairs, a circle of strangers, and a sense of safety she didn't expect. A woman smiled gently and motioned for her to take a seat. The meeting began. "Hi, I'm Olivia," said one woman. "I'm here because I'm tired of pretending I'm not breaking." Heads nodded. When it came time for Emily to speak, she hesitated, Her heart thudded in her chest. Words caught in her throat. Then, slowly, almost shyly, she whispered, "I smile a lot. People think I have it all together, but I'm exhausted. And honestly, I don't even know what healing looks like anymore." Silence followed, but not the uncomfortable kind. It was full of compassion. No one tried to fix her. No one gave her advice. They just listened. And that, oddly enough, felt like grace. Her voice cracked near the end, but she didn't apologize for it. For the first time in a long time, she let herself be seen without a filter. After the meeting, Olivia approached her with a small piece of paper. It was a handwritten note that read, "You're not weak for needing help. You're wise for seeking it." That line hit her like a wave. She had confused vulnerability with weakness her whole life. Her childhood had been full of phrases like, "Suck it up. Be strong and don't cry in front of people." But healing didn't live in repression. It lived in revelation. And that night, Emily walked home, not lighter, but somehow more grounded, like her sadness wasn't a defect, but a doorway to deeper strength. In the days that followed, Emily began noticing small shifts. She started praying differently, not for everything to be magically fixed, but for courage to face what she'd buried. Her prayers became conversations, not performances. "God, I don't need answers today," she'd whisper while making her coffee. "I just need peace while I wait." She wasn't healed. She still had nights of crying under the covers. But something was changing. Her willingness to be real, her courage to stop hiding, her decision to let the walls come down one brick at a time. And in doing so, she found something profound. There was strength even in the parts of her she thought were too broken to matter. One evening, while journaling, she wrote a phrase that would become her new mantra. "Being crushed doesn't mean I'm defeated." She underlined it 3 times. She realized life wasn't about never being broken. It was about learning how to live beautifully with cracks, to love anyway, to smile honestly, not as a mask, but as a mark of resilience. And so she prayed again, not with desperate pleading, but with quiet resolve. "God, if you're walking with me in this, help me remember I'm never too shattered to be made whole." She smiled. This time not because she needed to, but because hope had begun to bloom again. And that was worth everything. Part 3. Unexpected blessings. The heart softens when you stop pretending it's made of stone. It had only been a week since Emily attended that first support group meeting, but something about her days felt different. The clouds in her mind weren't gone, but there were streaks of light breaking through moments she hadn't expected. A stranger held the door open for her at the cafe with a warm "You go ahead." A former art student messaged her out of the blue, thanking her for encouraging their creativity. It wasn't dramatic or flashy, but it was enough to remind her she was still seen. Life hadn't forgotten her. And maybe, just maybe, God hadn't either. She began to notice beauty in places she'd once ignored. On her daily walks, the leaves rustling in the wind sounded like laughter. The flowers along the fence by her apartment, ones she had walked past for years now, felt like little miracles blooming without applause. One morning, she watched an old man feed the birds with such gentleness that her eyes filled with tears. It was like God had turned up the volume on joy. These small blessings didn't erase her pain, but they gave her something new to focus on: presence. For the first time in a long while, Emily wasn't rushing through the days trying to survive. She was slowing down just enough to live. The greatest blessing, though, came through a chance encounter. It was raining, of course it was, when she ducked into a bookstore for shelter. She hadn't planned to buy anything, but she wandered through the aisles anyway, drawn toward the quiet. A woman in her 60s sat at a corner table reading a worn-out Bible and humming softly. Emily smiled politely, but the woman looked up and said something that stopped her in her tracks. "You've got a gentle soul. Has anyone told you that lately?" Emily blinked. "No, actually." The woman smiled. "Well, you do. And gentle doesn't mean weak. It means you still feel. That's powerful." They talked for over an hour. The woman's name was Margot, a retired nurse who now volunteered at a grief ministry. She had lost her son 5 years ago, and instead of letting it shut her down, she used her pain to serve others. "I still cry," she said. "But I also laugh more deeply now. Suffering either softens you or hardens you, your choice." That hit Emily like truth wrapped in grace. Margot didn't try to fix her. She didn't recite hollow scriptures or empty encouragement. She just shared her story and listened. And in that quiet corner of the bookstore, Emily felt something sacred again: connection. That evening, Emily wrote her most honest prayer yet. "God, thank you for showing up in people, in rainstorms, in bookstores, in strangers who somehow know the exact words I needed to hear. I've spent so long waiting for big miracles, I forgot that sometimes the smallest ones change the most. Help me keep my heart open even when I want to shut it down." She closed her journal with a soft sigh. Healing wasn't fast, but it was real, and right now, that was enough. She didn't need a breakthrough. She just needed a breadcrumb trail of hope, and it felt like she was finally following one. A few nights later, she was back at the group meeting. This time she didn't hesitate to speak. She shared about the bookstore, about Margot, about how life was still hard, but the weight was a little lighter. The room nodded, a few smiled. One woman wept quietly in the corner, and afterward hugged Emily like they'd known each other forever. "Your story helped me," she whispered. Emily didn't expect that. She had only come to get help. But maybe, unknowingly, she was giving it to Wind. That realization that even crushed people could carry light felt like the biggest blessing of all. Part 4. The courage to be vulnerable. Vulnerability isn't weakness. It's truth, wrapped in courage. Emily sat at her kitchen table, her journal open, pen frozen in her hand. She had been trying to write a letter to herself. The group leader at Healing Hearts had gently suggested it as a private exercise. Write to the part of you that's still hurting, the part you hide from everyone else. But Emily couldn't start. How do you speak to your brokenness when you've spent most of your life running from it? She bit her lip and stared at the page. The silence in the room felt like pressure on her shoulders. Still, she forced her hand to move. "Dear me." The words came slowly at first, then like rain breaking from heavy clouds. "Dear me, I see you. I know you've been strong for so long. I know you've smiled when your world was falling apart. I know the nights you held in tears because you thought no one would understand. But you deserve to feel. You deserve to rest. You don't have to be everyone's rock anymore." Tears dripped onto the page as she wrote. But they weren't just sad tears, they were cleansing. For the first time, she was treating her pain like something worthy of kindness, not shame. Her whole life she had believed emotions made you less. But what if they were holy? What if crying wasn't a crack in your armor but a doorway to healing? Later that week, Emily had dinner with her friend Sarah, one of the few people who had seen her fall apart once before and didn't flinch. Over pasta and candlelight, Sarah noticed Emily seemed quieter than usual. "Everything okay?" she asked. Emily hesitated, then smiled, but this time it wasn't the fake kind. "Actually, no. But I'm learning that's okay." Sarah blinked, a little surprised. "Do you want to talk about it?" Emily nodded, and for the next hour she shared everything, the group meetings, the bookstore, even the letter she wrote to herself. Sarah didn't interrupt, didn't offer solutions. She simply held the space. That night, Emily realized something. Being vulnerable with the right people doesn't just heal you, it deepens love. The next day, her past came knocking in the form of an old email. It was from Daniel, her ex. The subject line simply said, "Hey, just wanted to say I'm sorry." Emily's stomach dropped. She hadn't heard from him since their engagement ended abruptly last year. He had left her at her lowest, emotionally drained and spiritually shaken. She'd told herself she'd forgiven him, but the truth was, she had buried the anger deep. The email was short, no excuses, no drama, just an honest apology and a blessing. "I hope you're healing. I wasn't what you needed, but I truly hope you find joy." She didn't reply not yet, but she sat with it. Let herself feel the things she hadn't allowed before: the heartbreak, the betrayal, the aching disappointment. That night, she whispered a shaky prayer. "God, I didn't want to face this again. But thank you for reminding me that healing is layered. Help me to forgive, not just him but myself for staying too long, for pretending I was okay when I wasn't. Help me let go without shame." And in the stillness, something shifted. She didn't feel vindicated. She felt free. Because true vulnerability, ice and tea, just about sharing penet, about owning your truth without apologizing for it. At the next group meeting, Emily shared something she had never said out loud before. "I used to think my value came from how little I needed, but now I realize my heart is strong enough to ask for more." The room went quiet. Olivia, the group leader, placed a hand over her chest and said, "That's brave. That's real." Emily smiled softly, humbly. Not because she had it all figured out, but because she was learning that the cracks in her story didn't make her unlovable. They made her relatable. And in a world of polished masks, that kind of honesty is revolutionary. Part 5. Weathering the storm. Storms don't always knock. Sometimes they crash right through your door. It was a Tuesday afternoon when Emily got the call. She was sketching in the sunlit corner of her apartment. Toby, the cat, lazily stretched across her lap, when her phone buzzed with a number she didn't recognize. It was the gallery owner downtown where she had submitted a portfolio months ago and nearly forgotten about. "Emily," the voice said, rushed. "We had a cancellation for next Friday. Are you still interested in a solo exhibit?" Her heart leapt hand, then immediately dropped. That was less than 2 weeks away. She had maybe half the work she needed. Her first instinct was to decline, but something stopped her. The girl who had finally stopped pretending was now being asked to step into the light. Opportunity always walks hand in hand with fear. Emily said yes, almost in disbelief. Then, when the call ended, she panicked. How could she pull this off? She hadn't fully painted in months. Most of her energy had gone into healing, prayer, and emotional survival. She started questioning everything. Was she good enough? Would anyone come? What if she failed in front of everyone? And then, to make it worse, life threw her a curveball. Her part-time job at the art supply store suddenly cut her hours. Money was already tight. She sat on the floor that night, surrounded by half-finished canvases and unopened bills, feeling the tears well up again. God, I said yes. Sometimes the storm isn't there to destroy you, it's there to test your roots. She took a deep breath, closed her eyes, and remembered the prayer she had whispered weeks ago. Help me be okay with not being okay. So she didn't hide. She called Sarah. She told her group. She messaged her former art students for advice and even asked Margot, the woman from the bookstore, to help her find a community space to work in. The old version of Emily would have suffered in silence. This version, she was learning how to ask, how to receive, and slowly things came together. A friend offered frames. Another offered free printing for flyers. A neighbor brought over food and stayed to help clean her studio. It wasn't a miracle. It was better it was community. The storm hadn't disappeared, but she was learning to dance in the rain. The night before the gallery opening, Emily stood in front of her final painting, hands covered in dried acrylic. It showed a woman standing in a field of darkness, her face cracked with gold, like Japanese kintsugi pottery. Beneath it, she'd written, "Even broken things shine." She had never created something so personal, so honest. She knew some might not understand it, but this wasn't about them anymore. Becoming now bold, open, brave. Opening night arrived and the sky opened too. It rained hard, just her luck. But when she arrived at the gallery, soaked umbrella in one hand, she found a small crowd already gathered. Friends, strangers, even her group from Healing Hearts. The room was full not just of people, but of warmth, laughter, conversation. Her paintings, flawed and heartfelt, spoke louder than she could. And in one quiet moment, as a young woman stood in front of her cracked gold painting with tears in her eyes, God, thank you for the storm. Not because I liked it, but because it showed me who I really am. Thank you for the people who helped me stand, for the courage to create, and for the grace to trust that even in uncertainty, you're building something good. She smiled not to cover pain, but to celebrate growth. The storm had raged, but she was still standing. No mask, no pretending. Just the quiet, extraordinary strength of someone who had walked through fire and chose. Part 6. Gratitude in everyday moments. Sometimes the miracle isn't in what changes, it's in what you start noticing. A week after the gallery opening, Emily walked through her neighborhood with no destination in mind. The air was crisp, the sky soft with clouds, and her heart quiet. Not the kind of quiet that comes from shutting down, but the kind that comes from peace. The exhibit had been a success in its own way, not in money or fame, but in courage. She'd shown up, shared her story through brushstrokes, and walked away feeling more whole. Now, she found herself looking at the world with fresh eyes. The bark on the trees, the rhythm of her own breath, the way the sunlight touched her skin, everything felt like a gift she had once been too numb to receive. Gratitude, she was learning, isn't about having more, it's about seeing more. Emily used to wait for big moments to feel joy, holidays, promotions, milestones, but now she was starting to see joy in the unremarkable. The warm mug between her hands in the morning, the cat purring against her side at night, the neighbor's kid waving excitedly each afternoon. She even found herself smiling at the laundry tumbling in the dryer, thinking, I'm here, I'm alive, I'm okay. It wasn't some forced toxic positivity, it was a hard-earned appreciation. Her soul, once bruised and guarded, was now softening, opening itself to the subtle grace tucked into daily life. One morning, she created a new ritual, something small but sacred. Each day, before checking her phone, before brushing her teeth, she would write down 3 things she was grateful for. Sometimes it was simple: hot shower, clean socks, a good dream. Other times it was deeper, the way Sarah really listens. The forgiveness I gave myself yesterday, the courage to try again. It took less than 2 minutes, but over time, it rewired her focus. Instead of waking up with dread, she began waking up with intention. Instead of asking, what do I have to face today? She started asking, what beauty might I notice today? The difference was life-changing. Then came a day that tested her growth. Her landlord gave notice her building had been sold. Emily had 60 days to find a new place. At first, panic rose like a familiar wave. She didn't have the savings for a big move. Rent had skyrocketed in the city. She could feel her body tense, the old fear creeping back in. What if I end up alone? What if I fail again? What if this ruins everything? But instead of spiraling, she did something different. She sat on the floor, took 3 deep breaths, and prayed, God, I don't know what this is leading to, but I'm choosing to trust. You didn't bring me through that storm just to leave me here. She opened her gratitude journal and wrote, 1. I have time to plan. 2. I have friends who will help. 3. I know how to begin again. And just like that, fear turned into clarity. She reached out to Sarah, checked a few local listings, sent messages to friends in her group. Within days, someone offered a guest house unit at a reduced rate closer to the park she loved. With space for a studio, Emily cried when she visited it. Not because it was perfect, but because it was enough. And more than that, it felt like provision, a quiet reminder that sometimes gratitude opens doors you didn't even know were locked. That night, she wrote her prayer under the moonlight. God, thank you for today, not because everything went right, but because I noticed it. Thank you for the way light filtered through the trees, for the laughter of children outside, for the stranger who smiled at me. Thank you for the ordinary. Help me never take it for granted again. She closed her journal with a soft smile. It was true, she was still healing, still learning, still walking forward with wounds, not yet fully closed. But she was walking, and in every small, quiet step, she was finding joy again. Real, unshakable joyfa, kind that doesn't depend on perfect days, but on a heart willing to see goodness even in the cracks. Part 7. Letting go and moving forward. Forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. It means choosing to stop bleeding over the same wound. Emily stood in her new apartment, sunlight streaking across the wooden floor, boxers half unpacked. There was peace, here fresh and unfamiliar, but tucked beneath it, like dust hiding under the rug, was something she hadn't faced yet, something old, something unresolved. As she organized her bookshelf, she came across a box she hadn't seen since her last move. Inside were cards, letters, and photographs, memories of a life she had let go of but never truly released. At the very bottom, wrapped in ribbon, was the wedding invitation she never sent. Her name, his name, the date that never happened. Her hand trembled as she held it heart tight in her chest. She had moved on, but had she healed? Guilt is a silent weight. It doesn't scream, but it settles deep. For so long, Emily had blamed herself for not seeing the red flags sooner, for loving too much, for staying too long in something that was slowly breaking her spirit. Even after Daniel's apology and even after her growth, there was still a voice inside that whispered, maybe it was your fault. Maybe you just weren't enough. She hated that voice. She had done so much to quiet it: journaling, therapy, prayer, but in moments like this, it returned with sharp clarity. She sat on the floor, invitation in her lap, and whispered, God, I don't want to carry this anymore. Forgiveness is not a one-time decision, it's a daily surrender. She had always thought forgiveness meant saying, it's okay, but it wasn't okay. He had hurt her, she had hurt herself. The loss had left a permanent mark. But forgiveness was on about pretending the pain didn't matter. It was about refusing to let it define her any longer. That night, she lit a candle, opened her journal, and wrote a letter she'd never send. Daniel, I forgive you. Not because you asked me to, not because I forget what happened, but because I refuse to keep reliving it. I forgive you, and I release you. I pray peace finds you, and I pray peace finally stays with me. But the hardest part came next. She had to forgive herself. That voice in her head, the one that told her she was foolish, weak, or broken, had lived rent-free for too long. She stared at herself in the mirror that evening, looked past the tired eyes and the quiet strength, and spoke aloud what she most needed to hear. I forgive you, Emily, for loving him, for trying, for not leaving sooner. You didn't fail, you grew, you survived. And that was never weakness, that was grace. Tears came fast, not the sorrowful kind, but the releasing kind. Her shoulders dropped, her chest opened. She felt light. Something shifted after that night. Not dramatically, but gently. She began to breathe deeper, sleep more peacefully, smile more freely, not as a mask, but as an expression of space within. She told her group at Healing Hearts about the letter, and several members cried with her. Forgiving ourselves, Olivia said, is often the final step toward freedom. Emily nodded, the words soaking into her like rain into dry soil. She had always thought healing would look like arriving somewhere perfect, whole, untouched. But now she realized healing looked like movement, like deciding every day to carry less and love more. And so she ended that week with a new kind of prayer. God, thank you for helping me forgive. Not because it erased the past, but because it released its grip on my future. Thank you for reminding me that I am allowed to begin again, that I'm not defined by what broke me, but by how I choose to rise from it. Help me keep choosing love. Help me keep choosing peace even when the past knocks. She exhaled. A long, gentle exhale. Forgiveness wasn't easy, but it was sacred. It was hers. And for the first time in a long time, she felt free. Part 8. Embracing the unknown. We Dante always need to know where we re-going, only that we re-going with God. It had been a few weeks since Emily forgave herself and Daniel, and life began unfolding with a surprising softness. Her daily routines felt lighter. She started to laugh again genuinely. But just as she thought things were settling into peace, an unexpected email disrupted her comfort. A job offer in another city, a new counseling center, looking for someone to lead emotional healing programs for women in crisis. It was a massive opportunity, and it terrified her. Change brings two companions, fear and possibility. Emily stared at the email for days. She hadn't applied for the job. Her name had been referred by someone in her healing group. "You've helped more people than you realize," the email read. "We believe your story could transform lives here." The invitation was humbling and paralyzing. Move again. Start over again. Leave the familiar faces of her support group, the rhythm of her routine, the safety of what she had finally begun to trust. But a still small voice inside whispered, "What if this is the next chapter?" She took a walk that evening, dusk, painting the sky in shades of lavender and amber. "God," she whispered, "I'm not sure I'm ready to let go again. I only just learned how to breathe here." But the truth was, comfort wasn't calling her. Growth was, and growth, she had learned, rarely happens without risk. Her heart didn't feel broken this time. It felt cracked open wide enough for something new. Emily met with her mentor the next day. "I don't want to run from peace just because opportunity knocks," she said. Her mentor smiled. "Peace isn't a place, Emily. It's a posture. If you found peace within, it can travel with you. God doesn't just bless locations. He blesses obedience." Those words settled in her bones. What if this wasn't a disruption of peace, but the expansion of it? That night, she packed her journal, lit a candle, and wrote another prayer. "God, I don't know what's ahead, but I know you're already there. If this is your will, open the doors. If it's not, close them gently. Either way, teach me to trust, not in my plans, not in my understanding, but in you." She felt nervous. Of course she did. But for the first time, fear didn't feel like an enemy. It felt like a threshold. A place to step forward, not to escape, but to expand. By week's end, Emily had accepted the offer. She announced it to her support group, teary-eyed, but excited. "I don't know what's waiting for me there," she said, "but I know what's waiting here if I don't go. Regret." They hugged her, blessed her, and reminded her this isn't goodbye. It's just another turn on the path. She didn't feel crushed this time. She wasn't faking a smile. She was smiling because she had something real to step into. A future built not from certainty, but from trust. Part 9. The strength to begin again. Emily arrived in the new city with just 3 suitcases. A suitcase full of nerves and a heart wide open. Everything felt unfamiliar: new faces, new routines, even the way the sun fell through the windows of her modest apartment. But unlike her last move, this one wasn't an escape. This was a choice, and when she unpacked, she didn't just unpack clothes, she unpacked courage. Beginning again isn't starting over, it's starting stronger. Her first day at the Women's Counseling Center brought a mix of emotions. She was warmly welcomed, introduced as someone who knows what it means to heal while still hurting. The director gave her freedom to build her own program, but with that freedom came fear. What if she said the wrong thing? What if her wounds were still too raw to help others? That night, she cried not from despair, but from the weight of responsibility. "I don't want to mess this up," she whispered, but deep down, she remembered something her mentor once told her. "You don't have to be perfect to lead you, just have to be present." Emily built a program called Healing While Holding On. The idea was simple. You, Dan T., have to let go of your past to move forward. You just have to stop letting it define you. Her first session was small: 5 women, each carrying their own invisible weights. One had lost a child, another had survived abuse, one hadn't spoken a full sentence in weeks. But Emily didn't lecture. She told her story, and in telling it, she unlocked theirs. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can say is, "Me too." She shared how she smiled through heartbreak, how she wore a mask even when her soul was crumbling, and how prayer didn't fix everything, but it kept her from falling apart. The silent woman in the corner began to weep. "I thought I was weak for still feeling broken," she said. Emily smiled gently. "No, you're not weak, you're healing, and healing isn't linear. It spirals, it loops, it dances, but it always moves, even when you don't feel it." She ended the session with a prayer. "Lord, for the woman who feels she has to smile while she's breaking, remind her that you see behind the mask, that you call her beautiful even when she feels messy, that you are proud not just of her strength, but of her softness. She's still standing, and that is more than enough." They left in silence, but a sacred one, not empty, just full in a quiet way. By the end of the month, the group had grown to over 20 women. Each session ended in prayer and poetry. Each woman had a journal with their own version of Emily's first prayer. They laughed together, they cried often, but they no longer cried alone. And Emily, she still had her moments. She still wondered if she was doing enough. But every time doubt came, she remembered, God doesn't call the qualified, He qualifies the called. Like and subscribe if you believe that God's timing is perfect, even when you can't yet see the full picture. Your breakthrough might be closer than you think. Part 10. The breaking point before the breakthrough. A strange paradox in the life of faith. The moment you feel closest to giving up is often the moment just before God turns everything around. It's like standing at the edge of a cliff in the dark, terrified only to realize the sunrise is seconds away. This is what I call the breaking point before the breakthrough. When you are stretched so far you feel you can't go another step, God is quietly strengthening the fibers of your soul. Just as gold is purified in fire, your spirit is purified in pressure. The very situation that feels like it's crushing you is also shaping you into someone capable of carrying a bigger blessing than you ever imagined. Scripture shows us this pattern over and over. Joseph sat in prison for years before God elevated him to power. The Israelites wandered for 40 years before stepping into the promised land. Even Jesus, in the Garden of Gethsemane, reached a moment of deep anguish before victory came through the cross. If they had given up at their breaking points, history would be very different. That's why your faith is being tested, not to destroy you, but to prepare you for the weight of the answer to your prayers. Right now, you might be thinking, I've prayed, I've believed, and still nothing changes. But faith isn't just about believing God. Can it is about trusting Him when you don't understand why He hasn't yet? I want to encourage you. The season you're in is not the end of your story. Your breakthrough may not come in the way you expect, but it will come. And when it does, you will look back and see how every delay, every disappointment, and every tear was woven into a plan far greater than your own. So hold on a little longer, stand firm. The same God who carried you through yesterday will not abandon you today. Your breaking point may just be heaven's signal that your breakthrough is next. Part 11. The ripple effect of your story. Like and subscribe so more people can find hope through stories like this. When God redeems your pain, it doesn't just stop with you. Your healing becomes a ripple in a pond, touching people you may never meet. The kindness you now show comes from a place of understanding. The wisdom you offer carries the weight of experience. The courage you embody gives others permission to believe again. Think about it. The people who have most impacted your life probably didn't have perfect stories. They walked through storms, and because they came out on the other side, you believed you could too. You are now becoming that person for someone else. God never wastes tears. He collects them, transforms them, and pours them out again in the form of grace for others. Your scars are now maps that point others to healing. The enemy wanted your pain to be a tombstone. God turned it into a testimony. When you share your story, even the broken parts, you give people courage to face their own valleys. And in the process, you see that your suffering was never just about you. It was a seed God planted, and now it's blooming into something eternal. Final conclusion. From pain to purpose, your story is not over. Pain was just one chapter. Purpose is the rest of the book. The season you thought would break you is the very season that prepared you. You are stronger than you were before. You're more compassionate. You're more anchored in faith. And because of what you've been through, you now carry a light that shines in dark places. Remember this. Your pain didn't disqualify you. Your pain prepared you. Your pain positioned you. From this moment forward, don't hide your scars. Wear them as proof that God heals, restores, and redeems. Someone out there is waiting for the hope you carry. When you speak, chains will fall. When you move, lives will change. And when you keep trusting, God will take you places you never imagined. The enemy meant it for harm. God is turning it for good. And your platform is just getting started.